23rd, I was fascinated to discover how many Americans in 1962 would have two photographs on their wall. They would have a picture of John Kennedy, and they would have a picture of John the 23rd.
Wow.
Um, and I say, but I think in terms of great celebrity, John Paul II, is the one that I think to this day most Catholics will see as the great, coalescing figure of the church.
And John the 23rd, when he called the Second Vatican Council, Vatican II, this was about 65 years ago now. Um, can you talk about that battle between the Vatican State, which was this architecture of power, versus Vatican II, which is, the movement of mercy largely?
Well, so there is in Rome, there's the Pope, and then there's there are hundreds of cardinals and bishops who are sort of the bureaucracy of the Vatican. They're known as the Curia, and they have, throughout the history of the church, exerted tremendous power. At the time John the 23rd came in, much of the leadership of the Curia, much of the bureaucracy was very close-minded, very traditional, very conservative, and they did not welcome the revolution that John the 23rd tried to bring. They did not welcome Vatican II. They worried it was going to create a revolution, and the after John the 23rd's death, again, very shortly after Vatican II opens, they first try to erase John's memory, and then they really try to shut down Vatican II before it makes the change that so many of the world's bishops wanted.
Mm. Yeah, and I want to get into some of those bigger changes because as someone who doesn't have a deep knowledge of Vatican II and now knows a lot more because of your book. But if you asked me what Vatican II was a year ago, I would say it's that thing that made the priests turn around and started talking in English, at least,
Yeah.
in New York where I went to church. Those are obviously huge changes. I don't think my family would have even gone to mass if it was still in Latin and the priest was facing the altar. What are some of the other changes that may not get as much credit in the public eye, but like were huge monumental shifts in the foundations of the church?
Well, you just cited the change that was in many ways perhaps the most revolutionary of all for most Catholics, which is suddenly they could understand the Mass. They could understand the words of the Mass. It is amazing that at the time of your parents and your grandparents, Catholics would go to Mass and they wouldn't understand the ceremony that they were being offered. And the priest would face away from them towards the wall, sort of this putting distance between the priest and the parishioners in the pew for unnecessary reasons. Well, as a result of Vatican II, Latin disappears. Suddenly, Catholics can go worship in language they understand. Certainly, they can see the priest as he's carrying out the services. So, that, on a very basic level, that was an incredible change in the church. But past beyond that, Vatican II inspired all sorts of change, important change, and sort of an embrace of the modern world. It ended the church's isolation from other faiths. For centuries, the Vatican had really treated other faiths, certainly other Christian churches, as sort of non-entities. They would have no communication with them. As a result of Vatican II, that sort of dialogue began, again, for the first time in centuries. There was a formal proclamation of the need for forgiveness from Jews, that there was a need for reconciliation with the Jewish people. For 2,000 years after the crucifixion, the Catholic, the Catholic Church held that all Jews were to blame for Christ's death.
Mm.
Well, at Vatican II, they said, no, that was wrong. Jews are, certainly modern day Jews are not to blame for Christ's death. And we want to embrace Jews and have dialogue with them. Again, a revolutionary change. And Vatican II also, there were documents that sort of proclaimed a social justice mission for the church, that the church could be involved in civil rights and voting rights and women's rights and things that the Vatican had treated as dangerous movements previously. So again, I was kind of amazed to discover that most Catholics, certainly the Catholics I knew nothing about Vatican II and knew nothing about what it accomplished. But it was a revolutionary set of meetings in which the world's bishops really did change the church in very fundamental ways.
Hey guys, if you like this clip, there's a lot more waiting for you. Join the Zach Show 2.0 to unlock the full video and audio version of this episode, plus bonus content you won't find anywhere else. Exclusive AMAs, the entire back catalog of premium episodes, and the ability to submit topics and questions for future shows. Subscribe today at thezachshow.supercast.com. I'll see you there.